Every 4 years, everyone says this is the most important election ever. But this is the most important election ever, especially when looking at it from an economic standpoint. In this video, I've detailed 3 topics that I think are important for discussing the economy and how each party's plans impact and guide the economy moving forward. And why, after doing all my research, I've come to my own conclusions that for the economy, what Canada needs right now is a broad, center-left approach that is much better than what the Conservatives have currently. And since I'm putting a lot of research into this video, I'm also going to take some time to address some economic misconceptions I see, just so that if you're not a Canadian who is voting in the election in the next 2 days, you can still get some value out of this. So with all of that out of the way, let's see Pierre Poilievre's plan on housing. Are you serious? This is like the biggest issue, and you decide to give it 1 page and no detail. All right, that's cute. The name of this section is Build Homes for a Change, which would be, if you think about it, sounds like it's increasing the supply. It's not. It's not. At least the first section is almost exclusively focused on increasing demand, which, fine. Number 1, if you have an issue with the supply of housing, why are you proposing cutting taxes on the buying of homes? Do you know what that does? It increases demand. That goes for you too, by the way, Carney. Don't think that just because yours is not as bad, it is escaping my wrath. Actually, I want to mention why it's not as bad. Let's specifically think about who needs homes right now. Well, people, families, individuals, maybe less so rich people and corporations. Pierre Poilievre's plan cuts the federal sales tax on all new homes under $1.3 million. Mark Carney's plan cuts the federal sales tax for first-time home buyers on homes up to $1 million. And they also have a subnote saying that in recognition of homes that are more expensive in certain housing markets, we will lower the GST on homes between $1 and $1.5 million for first-time home buyers, which is good. I don't like that the tax just immediately cut off at $1 million. I would like if it was more gradually decreasing, and so changing it in certain really expensive districts so it's a little bit more gradual, I think makes sense. It's actually really nice considering there's been a lot of complaints that there should be more of a sliding scale because of a home that's worth $1 million and 1 cent wouldn't get the tax exemption, but a house that's $999,999 would. That seems slightly unfair. Anyway, Mark Carney's plan is a much smaller tax cut, but it's also great for one specific reason. It actually helps young people buy a house. If you're going to do something like make it easier to buy something, aka increasing demand, when the issue is that there isn't enough supply, then you should make it apply to a very specific, narrow group of people. Carney has done that beautifully, with having his tax exemption only apply to homes under $1 million, but most importantly, only to first-time home buyers, as opposed to Pierre Poilievre, who is just cutting taxes for everyone. I don't think people my age quite realize just how negatively this impacts them at all. If every single person gets the tax cut, and you can get it on every home you buy, then the people who benefit most from this tax cut isn't young people, it's millionaires and billionaires and corporations and real estate investment trusts. I know one of you nerdy motherfuckers is about to be in my comment section.
Well, actually, Hudson, corporations and real estate investment trusts don't actually have to pay the sales tax on their federal sales tax on homes because they get that back at the end of the year.
I know that, but there is still a benefit to having the money right now as opposed to getting the money back in 11 months. Eat my ass. By not capping this to first-time home buyers, what this means is that millionaires, billionaires, trusts, anyone gets the exact same tax break that you do, even though you have a lot less money than them. Oh, Hudson, big deal. Who cares that millionaires are getting a tax cut? Here is the even more dubious way that this screws over young people and the people who can't afford homes. Because billionaires get this exact same tax cut as you do, that they can use that excess capital to buy more homes, thus making housing more expensive. If you want to buy $1.69 million worth of housing, which hypothetically speaking would be the $1.3 million limit from the Conservatives, plus a hypothetical 30% for closing costs, with 5% of that being the sales tax, you would save $65,000. But let's say a billionaire wanted to buy $169 million worth of housing, which would be 100 houses at the $1.3 million limit, plus 30% for closing costs, with 5% of that 30 being the sales tax. They would save $6,500,000, which is roughly enough to buy, you guessed it, another 4 fucking houses, thus making housing in whatever place you bought it much more expensive. The fact that so many young men my age think this guy cares about them is silly. This example was absolutely oversimplified, but I think you get my point. All this does is give people with millions of dollars the exact incentive to buy up as much single-family housing as possible, which drives up the price of single-family housing. This doesn't help young people own a home anywhere near the amount it helps rich people buy up more of the existing housing. And not only that, but the actual ways Pierre Poilievre plans to build more housing is categorically stupid. Tie infrastructure funding to results by rewarding cities that permit over 15% more home building annually and reducing funding for those that fall short. This is actually the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, good lord, if looking at city budgets and federal budgets, you want the federal government to have more of that money, you are batshit insane. And not only that, why does this have to apply to every city? Like, I understand that if housing is just built, then it tends to make the other types of housing and the neighboring cities' housing cheaper because it is seen as more expensive than the one building and people will flock to the cheaper housing. I understand that. But I don't think that some backwater Newfoundland town that few people already live in should have to continuously permit 15% more housing year after year after year or it gets its funding cut. That is ridiculous. But this whole plan is bananas. Pierre Poilievre's entire plan for increasing supply could fit on a napkin. Canada's in a housing crisis, and it's not because we ran out of space. You could fucking say that again. Like, look how big they had to make the font size when compared to the Liberal plan, which in my opinion is much more advanced. Overall, I have almost no complaints with the Liberal plan. Like, even a little bit. I have seen some criticism, so here's the part of the video where I review another video I don't like.
Next, he wants to reintroduce MURB tax incentives to spur multifamily home development. Basically, this will allow those who develop multifamily properties to reduce their taxes by offsetting depreciation and development costs from other sources of income. The theory is that back in the 70s, MURB incentives helped add 195,000 units in 7 years. Thankfully, we can check the data to see if this is true. And although this data is old, if you look at this analysis from the CMHC, it shows that multifamily construction didn't increase very much after MURB incentives were introduced. Instead, the largest increase was in single-family home dwellings, which were not covered by MURB incentives. Furthermore, most of the growth in housing was related to government involvement, not the private sector as is shown in this chart. And lastly, this period of time also coincided with a significant real estate bubble that eventually crashed. One of the drivers of this was people speculating on land to shelter taxes.
Yeah, all of this is cute until you realize it's all a really weird lie. For some reason, he says when MURB was introduced and then highlights the years 1981 to 1985. Spoiler alert, MURB was introduced in 1972. And although it doesn't fit neatly into any one of these year buckets, or at least the start of it, considering that population growth went down by almost 25% and multi-unit housing went down by a small tad, I think it's easy to say that it basically increased in the 2 time spans. And later in the video, he mentions that there was a real estate crash around this period of time, but doesn't think it's useful to mention that here, even though it's probably worth mentioning if you're going to say something so broad as multi-unit housing starts went down during this time period. But there's still so much more wrong with this. Not only did he highlight the wrong fucking years for the one piece of legislation he was talking about, good job on the research there, guys. MURB legislation was cut. It stopped. There was a reason we have to bring it back. It stopped existing. Do you want to guess the exact year it stopped existing? I shit you not, 1981. What he said is so fucking stupid, it's literally a lie. And now that we know that MURB legislation was actually cut in 1981 and not fucking established, it kind of makes the argument of pro-MURB legislation, honestly, look more appealing. Look what happened to multi-unit housing when it was cut. Furthermore, most of the growth in housing was due to government involvement. Buddy, are you fucking looking at this graph? I don't know what you're smoking, but no government involvement is in black, and some government involvement is in gray. I count 3 black bars and 2 gray bars. Get your eyesight checked, my guy. I actually checked this study to see what he was referring to and read through it a little bit, just so we all are like crystal clear about the definition of like public and private sector. Government involvement includes government-owned housing units, units constructed under direct loans to builders and housing organizations, and dwellings financed through low to moderate income support programs. What do you mean not the private sector? Is a corporation simply taking a loan from the government disqualify it from being private sector? In order of high IQ to low IQ, are you silly, goofy, dumb, stupid, or a libertarian? Obviously, anyone wouldn't think that taking out a loan from the government disqualifies you from being a part of the private sector. Just read out what qualifies as government involvement right below. Now, that being said, there are absolutely criticisms to be had with MURB legislation at the time. It creates the incentive to just build multi-unit housing instead of building livable multi-unit housing. Because you get the tax benefit when you just build the house, it can create an incentive that isn't necessarily the best, where you might just want to build a unit just to get the tax break. But I haven't seen anywhere near the data to improve that the majority or anywhere near that number of the multi-unit housing starts that were constructed under this time were strictly because of the tax break. It didn't matter if it was livable or not. Anything like that. I think most people, if they spend the time to build a house, would like to at least rent it out. That's my understanding. And I believe that we have way more tools nowadays to combat something like that than we did in the 1970s. Besides this one video I've seen that I at one point did think was smart, but now I don't trust at all in the slightest. Everyone admits that Mark Carney's housing plan is far more detailed, efficient, and plausible when it comes to bringing housing prices down. By the way, I want to address something. All right. I just attacked what I believe is probably some like libertarian YouTube channel. I gotta address my lefty pals. Build Canada Homes. Steve Boots. Housing developers aren't basically financiers, okay? Build Canada Homes is not basically just a financer. Come on, man. Really? As for you, 2 and 20, I hope that you guys aren't malicious actors and maybe you just didn't coordinate with your editor, but I would issue a correction like almost immediately if I were you. Growth will be split up into 3 sections. I have to say this right now. I'm sick and tired of listening to conservatives talk about the economy when they have no idea what they're talking about. Someone asked me a few weeks back why I'm voting for Mark Carney, and I told them why. I talked about how Carney is the only person who talks about the economy in an intelligent way, and for me, that's basically all it takes to get my vote and my dedication for my entire life. If you just speak intelligently about the economy, bro, I will. The way Trudeau spent was wrong, in my opinion. You should never moralize the economy, and the way that Trudeau went about spending the way he did, it bothered. That being said, I'd be lying if the way that Pierre talked about spending money didn't just piss me off. Cutting spending and taxes and trying to run a fiscal surplus is almost always stupid. It is never the most efficient thing you can do. Ideally, as a country, you would run a small fiscal deficit every year and make sure that you invest that money into things that generate a higher return than the interest rate on the debt. This is always the case. If you disagree with me, you are wrong. We're in hypothetical land right now. Like, this is just the most ideal policy is this, 5% is bigger than 3.5%. If you disagree with this, you're just wrong. And I didn't say that to him exactly, but he said something like, well, what if you have trillions of dollars in debt? Which, I mean, Canadian federal debt is 1.25 trillion, so that 0.25 is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. But still, this is almost a rule for the economy. You should always be taking out debt to fund things if the interest rate on the debt is lower than the return on investment, given a hypothetical decent margin of safety. It's very fast, it's very loose, but if you know you can get 10% on a return and it costs 3.5% to get a loan, you should do that. You should do that. There will come a day when an apple is $1 trillion. Obsessing over the specific dollar amount is silly. Even if you have mega super duper trillions of dollars of debt, if you can take out debt at 125% interest rate and invest it in an infrastructure project that will increase your citizens' productivity enough that they make more money and now your taxes are up 250%, then you should do that. This is objectively, mathematically correct. And if you disagree with this, you are fundamentally wrong. You shouldn't be angry about the amount of debt or the fact that debt is being taken out. Focus your anger on actual issues at play here. The way to analyze debt, roughly, is debt to GDP. This is good because if the returns were enough that they would offset the cost of capital, then debt to GDP would go down. And if they weren't, then they would go up. And when you look at this information, shit gets dicey for the conservatives. The first time that conservatives would have passed a budget with the expectation of it lasting a year would be from 2007 to 2015. In that time, debt to GDP went from 39.06 to 51.67. Of course, I can absolutely understand having your debt to GDP increase in 2008. It was a crisis. I understand that. But consistently, almost every year besides that, the debt to GDP stayed basically the exact same or went up. The first time the Liberals would have passed a full budget would have been 2016. From 2016 to 2019, debt to GDP consistently went down from 52% to 48%, missing by 0.01, a 4-point decrease. Then COVID happened. Like I said with the conservatives, it's a crisis. I understand taking out a lot of debt and having your debt to GDP rise. I get that. And it did increase to 69.86%. But then subsequently has been going down, getting to 56% in 2022. Now, 2023 did see a 2% increase in debt to GDP. I'm cool with that because it is mainly explained by interest rates being hiked to combat inflation, and that is out of the purview of the federal government. I understand it. I don't like it, but I know why it has to be done. But as more and more data is released, 2024 is expected to have a decrease in debt to GDP. But if you don't want to look federally, you can look provincially. Data indicated that 7 provinces are likely to see an increase in their ratio of debt to GDP between 2007-08 and 2023-24. Analysts expect Alberta to have the largest percentage point increase in their ratio, an increase of 22.4 percentage points. Manitoba is projected to have the second largest percentage point increase, in its ratio rising by 16.1 percentage points. Quebec, however, is one of only 3 provinces to decrease its debt burden relative to the economy since 2007-08. Other provinces include Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. I'm not here to say I know everything, I just want us to have a more intelligent conversation on this topic. Taking out debt is inherently fine. Cutting the rate of population growth below the rate of housing growth, job growth, and healthcare accessibility is kind of stupid. Number one, I really don't even know what that means. Will he average these 3 numbers out, or will he just pick the lowest one? I have no clue. Considering that the plan can fit on a sticky note, I'm just gonna go with he's gonna go with the lowest one. And if you don't like that, sorry conservatives, maybe give a better plan next time. Anyway, this is especially stupid considering you want your population growth above the rate of housing growth for starters. How many people live in your house? If it's more than 1, that's my fucking point exact. Well, Hudson, obviously he doesn't mean exactly. That would be stupid. Maybe, but I actually do think he might do that. And considering this entire plan can fit on 1 sticky note, if you do not like that I'm going with the least charitable option, maybe put more time and effort into your plan next time, conservatives. I'm begging you. You do not in fact need 1 person for 1 house, especially considering that we don't even have the people we need right now to build the homes. And besides, I will say this to other young men. If you like work in the trades, Mark Carney's plan is actually better for you. One of the huge things that is slowing down the economy is young people aren't really doing well. The youth unemployment rate in 2024 was 13.2%, whereas the core aged adults unemployment rate was 5.4%. But one of the things that Build Canada Homes would do is help you get a job. Incentivize companies to hire apprentices and recent graduates by establishing new requirements on federal contribution agreements to major projects that commit industry partners to include significant opportunities for young Canadians. Mark Carney feels like the only person fighting for people like me right now. I really appreciate that. And to anyone who is scared by the spooky, scary Century Initiative, to get to that spooky, scary 100 million by 2100, it is a 1.3% population growth. Canada historically has had around a 1.3% population growth. This is basically the normal population growth rate over the past few decades. Environment. Okay, number 1. Adapting marine protected areas to ensure science, not ideology, determines where harvesters can land their catch. Just in case that means what I think it means, listen here. Newfoundland, you have to stop fishing the fucking cod. You guys are like addicts. Stop fishing all of the fucking cod. You're not gonna have any more fucking fish to fish if you don't stop fishing the fucking cod. All of you deranged animals sound like drug addicts. Please, man, I just need a little bit more fish, man. Please, let me just give me a little bit more, please. I just need a little bit more fish, Ontario. Oh my God, we just basically got the cod out of the fucking endangered species list, and you fucks want to put them right back on. With that out of the way, this is the Conservative policy on protecting the environment and lowering emissions. Look, I don't like how the Liberals talk about taxes and environmental protection as something you just have to endure. That being said, Conservatives, you guys are not recognizing some very important things here. The green technology and sustainability market is expected to grow at 23.1% every year, including solution and service. Oil is expected to decline in demand after 2030. As soon as you start thinking of energy as a business, you recognize that one just makes more fiscal sense than the other. Even the Saudis are divesting money from oil. This weird allegiance conservatives have to oil is silly. The positives of oil is that it gives hardworking people who might not have the best education the ability to make decent money, and it's profitable. But oil is increasingly becoming less profitable and is having a smaller ability to give hardworking, less educated people a good paying job. On the flip side, Mark Carney's approach to the carbon tax really appeals to me. Having it so that the taxes are put on the biggest polluters while having a carbon credit system that promotes green technology is awesome. There are no good ways with a strictly free market approach to look at corporations who are abusing collective rights like a clean environment. We all benefit from a clean environment without a government to step in and say, hey man, polluting water with shit and ass is bad. Corporations will pollute water with shit and ass. And the people who have to pay that tax aren't corporations. They'll drink fucking Dasani. They don't care. We are the people who have to drink from those waterways. It doesn't benefit us at all. Having a tax on pollution that can be effectively paid off with carbon credits is great. The damage that big polluters charge us by making our environment worse, by emitting carbon into the atmosphere, which we are the ones paying for, is now paid by companies that emit. To make companies that make things like carbon capture or companies who clean up the environment more profitable. All this program does is make polluting companies pay the price of polluting to corporations that clean up said pollution. Why does anyone think this is bad? Well, Hudson, won't the tax be passed down to consumers? Obviously, but the benefits would be passed down to consumers too. The green corporations that are creating technology that help the environment can now hire more people and do more things. Well, Hudson, if all the money will go to the green companies, what's the point of it? Because it makes it so that Canada is one of the few countries that incentivizes companies to be a part of the solution. It incentivizes the companies who might not have a bigger sale, but have much faster wins.
You get it? It was a ship metaphor, because dirty technology as a market is probably still worth more than clean technology. That being said, clean technology has a much higher growth rate. So it's the bit, would you rather have $1 million today or a penny that doubles in value every day for a month? Brainlets pick the $1 million, but the Albert Einstein genius people, you get it. You understand what I'm saying.
All right, this is a heads up. I don't even know if any of their plans mention inflation, but I have to tell you something. Inflation isn't a bad thing. Inflation isn't a good thing. Stop moralizing the economy. Inflation also is not the government printing too much money. And if it is, then it surely shouldn't be blamed on the liberals. Most of the inflation that people felt post-pandemic had way more to do with global supply lines being messed up for obvious reasons. We shut the fucking economy down for a year and a half. There's gonna be a little bit of a fucking hangover from that. If you ever had a specific thing go up more than the actual stated inflation rate, most of that was because of global issues outside of the government's control. Inflation, the true definition of inflation is not when government prints too much money. The true definition of inflation is literally just prices going up. If every farm in the world suddenly blew up because of aliens and prices went skyrocketing because of that, that wouldn't be because of governments printing too much money.
Yeah, it would.
Oh shit, I guess you're... Inflation is just when prices go up in general for any reason. And something I really don't like about Pierre is he keeps framing inflation as this thing that Trudeau did, literally having a slogan called just inflation. This is horseshit, because Justin Trudeau had literally nothing to do with inflation for this very specific reason. The Great Depression was basically caused by the Federal Reserve taking interest rates to zero. And then, when the bubble that preceded the Great Depression ultimately fucking popped, they couldn't fix it because the one thing that the Federal Reserve has control over the most is interest rates. And where were interest? They're at fucking zero still. So post Great Depression, countries wised up on not having partisan central banks, because if they were controlled by presidents or prime ministers, interest rates would literally always be zero because politicians consistently juice the economy for short-term gain and long-term detriment. And now almost every country has an independent central bank, including Canada. Do you want to know who basically controls the rate at which money is printed in this country? It's this guy. Fiscal policy is something that is separate from economic policy. It is a lot more narrow and agreed upon. Everyone agrees that you should have lower interest rates and print money during a recession. The point is not that inflation exists or that the cost of living exists. It's that wages aren't keeping up with it. And a guy who spent his entire life in government and still has the fucking gall to incorrectly tell you how it works might not be the most trustworthy guy for the job of prime minister. Thank you all so much for watching. I will be doing a live stream on the 28th with a bunch of Canadian content creators. So far, we have the Ocean Channel, Unbiased Historical Forum, Wokezar, and fucking Real Albanian Pat coming on the stream. So if you are a Canadian content creator with a decently sized following, comment on this video, shoot me your Discord. You can hop on. You don't even have to be political. And if you want to support me, the best way to do this, the only way to do this really, is with memberships. So please consider doing that. They're cheap and affordable. You get these amazing emotes. All the perks are politics themed. I don't know. I might change them. But if you want a shout out on this channel, you know what to love you all. Stay tuned for a predictions video with Empower Politics tomorrow, I think, or the next day. I don't know. Love you. Bye.